Hello and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to confidence in starting and growing your business. Well, this is part 2 of an interview with Dr. Zareen Roohi Ahmed, the founder and CEO of GIF Wellness. And if you've missed part 1, I'd really encourage you to go and listen to that too. Part 1 was centred on the way in which Zareen managed to channel grief from the sudden loss of her daughter Halima into real purpose through the charity that she set up in her daughter's name. And we left part 1 at a cliffhanger moment. Zareen had felt the spirit of her daughter telling her that her next venture would be an entrepreneurial one. And it led to her becoming the founder and CEO of GIF Wellness, which creates natural products that support well-being, champion social impact and environmental sustainability. Now, Zareen had never really considered herself an entrepreneur to that point. So did she know how to get started?
I didn't have the foggiest. Even the internet was new then, in terms of this sort of thing. There was no Shopify, or there was no. The smartphones had just come out in 2007, the year that the first iPhone was out in 2007, the year that Halima passed away, 3 years before. And I had a clunky phone. It wasn't like, we didn't have the resources that we have now. And everything was expensive. And, to set up a website cost a fortune. So the first thing I did was, when I came back, was I started researching this issue, first of all, of the lack of, menstrual products for women in difficult situations, in war zones and refugee camps and famine-stricken areas of the world and things like that. And to my horror, realised that it wasn't just women in far-reaching places, it was women on my doorstep that were suffering from this issue as well. Homeless women, women in refuges, shelters, women on low incomes, paid women, teachers, nurses who were depending on food banks and things like that, and who had to make the choice: do I put food on the table for my kids, or do I buy products for myself? And were making do, and the whole stigma around it, and girls in schools and things like that. So that was the first shocker for me. And then I thought, okay, let's go back to kind of the Anita Roddick and those sort of conversations that I had with Halima. And I was kind of having conversations with her on paper, mind maps, and, her voice and my voice together, and sort of brainstorming with myself and her voice. And I knew that I needed to start a business, and that this business needed to be a model where for everything I sold, I would donate products to women in crisis. Mm-hmm. The word period poverty didn't exist. The phrase period poverty didn't exist at that point. It was that was coined much later in 2017-18, when the Plan International's report came out about period poverty in schools. They called it period poverty. And before that, I just called it women in crisis. So, it was a case of reverse engineering it from that vision.
And there's a big focus in this on, if I've understood it correctly, the sort of like, the social entrepreneur side of things, and also a big focus on environmental sustainability.
Yes.
Were those similarly sort of voices, from sort of Halima sort of saying that to you, as well as you to yourself maybe as well?
Totally. I mean, when I started looking at products to sell, and I went to Alibaba.com, and I went to other European suppliers as well who could do the white labeling, the kind of, buying their products off the shelf and labeling it as my product so I could sell. And I found that 99% of them were very toxic, very filled with plastics and made with petrochemicals, and realized actually why my time of the month was always horrible, and why I felt so ill, because of the effects of these. I started looking into the effects of the chemicals um, on the body and the plastics and things like that. And a strange thing had happened when I was in Pakistan inaugurating the school. I was with my mum and we went into, it was the day before the inauguration. We had some time. We went into this Chinese herbalist and he he showed me this material that was made of, it was made from the mineral tourmaline, which is a natural mineral stone that emits negative ions and far infrared ray and helps circulation and things like that. And he'd given her this belt, and then he handed me a pack of menstrual pads and said, "Try these and see if you know how you are with them." And they have the same material that I've given to your mum for her blood pressure and circulation and things like that. And I didn't think about it at the time, but then I remembered that I'd got those products and tried those products, and they were kind of miraculous. But they were quite rudimentary. The quality wasn't of the fabric, and the material that they were made of was a bit rough and ready, but the effect of the tourmaline under the top layer of the pads, I don't know, I just felt better. So I ordered some more and then tested them with friends and family to see, how they felt, sisters and cousins and nieces and so on. And they all said the same thing. And they all said, well, I'm not getting headaches anymore, or, my menstrual cycle is just normalized. It was really horrible before, and I'm not getting as much pain, and I just feel better. That was the general thing that came back. Don't know, I just feel better, sleeping better, everything, more energy, and so on. So I actually went about finding a manufacturer who could source the element of with the tourmaline and then natural products to build my pads. So I ordered lots of raw materials and then found a manufacturer through a shortlisting process, elimination, process of elimination, and found my manufacturer that I'm still with today now.
Okay, so
Yeah.
on that, I mean, just in terms of the debate around you, I know you said the term period poverty came a bit later and so on, but I mean, at that time, did you feel you were fighting a bit of an uphill battle because, because it's a subject that, the kind of male-dominated media of 10 years ago might not have wanted to talk about. I don't necessarily want to make this a sort of gender thing,
Yeah.
but was there a feeling that maybe this isn't a subject that a lot of people were comfortable discussing, and presumably that's now not disappeared, but certainly lessened, perhaps?
Not just men, women as well.
Right.
We're often our worst enemies. And I would have when my first container arrived and I first started selling them, it was disgust that I faced. People would cross the road where I was doing a sampling event outside a shop, or they would cross the road literally when they realised what it was.
Yeah.
Oh my God, look, it's it's pads and stuff. Oh gosh, quick, cross the road, and that still happens to some extent. It does. But campaigns like the Me Too campaign and lots of things that have happened recently, and COVID, and just more awareness has really helped the conversation along. But I mean, the best example is when my first container arrived. So, I did kind of 18 months of this research and development and creating the brand and all that sort of thing. And I had to learn all that, literally. And I think my family thought I was going a bit mad, but, and brothers and sisters, but they left me to it because they knew me. I was a leader, remember, when I was little. And especially now, after what had happened, they didn't want to mess with me, and they just left me to it. I wasn't earning anything, from my job that I left and 3 years before, and I was just feeling my way through this quandary, through this maze of new information, and it was keeping me going and giving me something to focus on. And so in January 2013, my first container arrived. And the first thing that I did was I wanted to give some products to a charity to take to a refugee camp. I wanted to start fulfilling that mission. And my sister-in-law, Nahida, she told me that there was a local charity called Syria in Need who were putting a container of stock together to take over to a refugee camp. And it turns out it was the same refugee camp that I'd read about in the airport lounge, the Zatari Syrian refugee camp, which was like the biggest one. And so I called them up, excited that I'm going to give them all of this free product to take. And I rang the guy from the flyer that my sister-in-law gave me. And this was just before the container had just arrived. And he said, I said, I have menstrual products for women in the refugee camps. Come and collect as many as you want that you can fit into your container. I know that you leave, the container's leaving in a few days. And his response was, he said, "Oh, sister, well, the container's almost full now, and it's got kind of really important stuff in it, like food and clothes. And, maybe we'll take some of your stuff. It'll be nice to take some of your stuff next time with the next container." That was his response. And so I asked him where he was, where they were. And I said, "Well, can I bring a few down in my car?" He said, "Yeah, okay, bring some down in your car." And I went down, and he saw me arrive, and it was this sort of big warehouse thing that, I think they have auctions there and things like that, and they'd got part of that. And there were volunteers putting stuff into the container, and he walked towards me, and he was like huge beard and hat and like Hagrid, and walking towards me like this, and and he, which was a little bit intimidating. But I sat him down and I explained to him. I asked him where. I said, these, and I knew the answer because I'd done all my research. And I said, these products that you're taking to these refugees, are most of the refugees men or women? I knew what the answer was. And he said, yeah, they're mostly women and children in these camps. And I said, okay. I said, so imagine for a moment you arrive at this camp and you're giving this stuff to women who are there. And in the crowd, you see your mum, you see your wife, you see your daughter, your sister. And no matter where they're going to go next or what they're doing or how they're surviving, you know that they're going to get their period, and you haven't got menstrual products for them to give them. And at first he was sort of, oh my God, the woman in the headscarf just said the P word in public, and it was a shock to him. And he looked around to see if anyone else heard me say period. And then I said, look, my point is that, those women that you're going to see, they are somebody's mother, somebody's daughter, somebody's sister. And he started to cry, like with his face in his hands, cry. He said, I can't believe that we've been doing this for so long. And, we've missed such a major part of aid. And, you've really opened my eyes to this. And needless to say, he sent several vans to take, many pallets of my stock. And they've been taking my stock ever since to different parts of the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my, I mean, that's a very powerful story, and I'm sure there are sort of
Mm.
many others that we could look at. I mean, but did
I'm
this
still
lead
having
you?
that conversation. I'm
I bet
still
you
having
are.
that
Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
today
yeah.
with charities all the time.
Do you feel like it's an easier, not an easy conversation, but do you feel like there's progress being made though in those
Oh yeah,
conversations? Yeah.
yeah, there is, but it's still not a priority. And the reason why it needs to be a priority is because I've been to Syrian refugee camps now myself. I've actually fulfilled that vision of handing the products with my own hands. There's a Syrian refugee camp in Lebanon a couple of years ago where I interviewed women as well. And what I realized was that it was while I was writing my book. So there's a section in my book where I describe this and part of an interview.
And
And
this is your book, The Gift,
the
One Woman's
gift,
Journey from Tragedy to Building a Global Business for Good.
yes,
Yeah.
thanks. Thanks for
Just
the
wanted to
plug.
make sure the listeners knew its
Yeah.
full title. So,
Yeah. So, what I realized was that women in these refugee camps, they are the ones that are holding up the tents. They are the ones that have to be well enough to and free enough to make build the relationships with other members in the camp. So that when food is scarce, when they run out of aid, when they need things or need help in any way, they're the ones that have built the relationships in the camps, and they share food and things like that. If women don't have menstrual products and they're having to hide in their tents, they're not able to go out and be resourceful and find and survive and make sure that everyone else is okay. We all know this. When mum's okay, everyone's okay, aren't they? When your
mm.
wife is okay, everyone's okay, isn't she? When your mum was okay as a kid, everyone in the family was okay.
Yeah.
If mum's in a bad way for whatever reason, then the tone of the whole home comes down, and everyone struggles to thrive. So this is why it's so imperative for women to have menstrual products.
This is very powerful and inspiring set of stories here. I mean, in terms of you having to sort of set up this business and get it going and then building it and getting people on board and so on, what did you learn as a sort of entrepreneur, if you like? I mean, it's a lot of people think entrepreneurs an exciting thing, but it comes with pressure and difficult decisions. What kind of skills did it bring out in you, and what kind of leader have you been in doing that? I mean, what did it bring out in you that maybe you didn't know was there?
I think because I did it, my starting point was very naive and innocent. I was curious like a child, and I try to, even now as a founder leader in my organization, I try to stay in that zone of curiosity, of
Mm,
absorbing, of having to build relationships, because without that, I know that I'll never do it alone. Yeah, anyone who says they're self-made is lying. No one is self-made. So, when I kind of, one thing I knew was it was my kind of dream to get my products into Holland and Barrett. That it was just, I because I thought Holland and Barrett are ethical. They're a chain. I would have a presence in every town and city, but at the same time, they're ethical and things like that as well. That was the impression that I had, which kind of changed a bit over time. But at the time, I knew that I wanted to get my product. I thought if they're in Holland and Barrett, then they're everywhere. So that was my goal. So I set that goal. And then I learned that before I needed to, before I spoke to someone in my local chamber, and they said, yeah, start writing to the buyers, start showing them your products and things like that. And I spoke to one or two, and then I learned from those conversations that actually, before you go for those big fish, you need to show a bit of track record that your products are in shops. So target some independents and things like that first, and show that your products are already in those shops. So I went to a few shops, and then those shops told me, actually, before you come to us, you should be kind of approved by one or two of the big distributors that we buy from. So it was that kind of chain of command, and so I went to a few distributors, and the distributors said, no, you need to go back to shops, find a couple of local shops that will sell your product. Once they're selling for a few weeks, then come back to us to show us that. So I had to do a bit of toing and froing, but it was all learning, and I did manage to, using the pull of the charity, that tension, that look, I'll do you a really good deal, buy some of my products. I did a show as well, the Natural Products Europe show, which is a wholesale, and like, it was so expensive, and I didn't know if I'd get anyone on board, but I had a tiny little 1-by-1 stand or something there, and I had my products, samples of my products, and the order form and things like that, and I actually got some shops on board. So I got a handful of shops on board, and then maybe 20 or something like that, and they were buying them. I was selling to them. Did that for a couple of months. Then I went back to the distributors, and they took them on. And they had the big databases of all the independents that they sold to, and so it started. And within 6 months later, I was at another show called the Allergy and Free From Show, which I do kind of almost every week, really. And a buyer from Holland and Barrett walked past and saw this crowd of women that I was talking to, standing on a box, kind of talking to them.
You're on your soapbox.
Yeah, literally, because I'm not very tall, and I had to project my voice, and I don't have a very loud voice. So and it was very noisy, this show at the Olympia in London, which is coming up in June, and I'll be there again. And yeah, this buyer came past and just kind of put her arm through this crowd and handed me her card. and she said, email me. And I just took the card and put it in my pocket, and then afterwards looked at it, and it was a buyer from Holland and Barrett. And so then, it was a bit of a journey to get into Holland and Barrett, and I had to make lots of sacrifices, but and their terms were just horrendous. They took 65% of the profit, which didn't leave much to do the period poverty work from.
No.
But I still did. I was still giving just products from my bottom line, because that's why I was doing it,
Yeah. So what now for, I mean, in terms of what's next for sort of GIF Wellness and the GIF Wellness Foundation, of course. I mean, what's coming next, and what have you learned as an entrepreneur to date? I mean, one of the things that comes across to me, and it seems, I mean, in your case, it seems very trite to talk about resilience, because you've had to endure resilience or show resilience in a completely different way to many people. I mean, is that one of your lessons, or do those little bumps on the road where you were talking to this person, they said, no, you ought to be talking to that person or that person? I mean, would they sort of seem very small little bumps, to you, sort of given the sort of the history of all the things that led up to that? I'm just interested in, first of all, what's next for you, GIF Wellness and the foundation, and also what would you pass on to the next generation of entrepreneurs who are sort of coming up, maybe hesitating about whether this is the right thing for them or not, in terms of passing on in terms of advice?
I think the first thing is to be adaptable in this day and age, because I mean, what happened next after Holland and Barrett? I ran the business like that for a few years. And then COVID happened. And then I had to pivot the business because all the shops were closed. So I had no customers, had no custom. So I had to pivot the business from selling to businesses, retailers like Holland and Barrett, to going online on Shopify and hoping that, and setting up a social media profile that I'd never done before, and hoping that my customers from Holland and Barrett and all the other shops will find me. By then, bear in mind, I had shops in Europe, across the UK, hundreds and hundreds of independents, the whole of Holland and Barrett. It was a top seller in Holland and Barrett, and I had to start from scratch, completely away from retailers to turning it into a B2C business. And so resilience is one thing. And also just before COVID, I'd set up the Gift Wellness Foundation because it was just after the Me Too campaign and the period poverty report from Plan International, and people started coming to me and saying, look, can we get involved in this period poverty work with you? And as a business, even though it was a social enterprise, that didn't kind of feel right. So I felt that this is an opportunity to grow the charity side of it, which is what Halima would have loved. So we set up a separate charity called the Gift Wellness Foundation, the website, with a website, which was a very clever move and a very good tip for entrepreneurs, because I called the website periodpoverty.uk. And so we still, without having done any marketing, paid marketing, we still come up at the top of Google because it's called period poverty. When people are looking to support period poverty, like, call your website what your product is. It's not rocket science. and don't call it Apple or call it what your actual product is, that you're solving, or your problem that you're solving. And so we pivoted the business. We are still building the business from that point because it's only been 2-3 years, and we will go back to retailers. We're kind of going back to retailers now, having established a subscription-based sort of customer base where we're selling direct to customers, so that if there's another pandemic, I know that everything won't be lost. We've got our own customer base, so we've got that security. And then while I was, because during COVID I had time as well, I started writing the book and really kind of peeling off the layers of the whole journey, and realized that I was just addressing the symptoms of period poverty and these issues that women face. What about girls in schools? What about girls in the home? What about women in the workplace? And all these sorts of issues, and also a lot more of the environmental issues I started focusing on as well. And I did Al Gore's Climate Reality Leadership program during COVID, and so I'm one of his leadership core climate reality champions now as well in the UK. And so the book actually triggered a lot of what's next, because when you record in a chronological order everything that you've been through, what you find is that your mind will take you naturally to what's next. And what was next was the soap bar range, which is the cleansing bars championing plastic-free bathrooms. So not just menstrual products, but other body care products that are completely plastic-free. You don't need shampoo bottles, a bottle of shampoo, body wash, face wash, hand wash, conditioner, all this. You don't need that clutter of bottles. You need one bar. And we have an all-in-one bar that does everything. And it works better than the bottled ones. And it's all made of natural ingredients like coconut oil and Epsom salts and essential oils, and it feels like a spa experience. They're wonderful. And then from that, it was one of the major things was the workplace inclusivity program. And that's where I developed a program using VR technology. So you put on an Oculus headset, the gaming head. I basically gamified it for the boys.
Okay. Right.
so that it wouldn't be too scary. And you put on a headset and then you step into the shoes of a woman in the workplace who's going through menstrual issues or menopause and things like that. And you have her voice in your head and you're going through her day while she's having these issues. And nothing builds empathy like that, because you're literally in her shoes with her voice and experiencing the trials that she goes through. And I did some from a man's perspective as well. So we have a mental health scenario, we have a parental leave scenario, and an invisible disability scenario. And then after the VR thing was set up and I tested that with various organizations, then we developed an online program, and which is an online kind of portal, a learning portal, where every person in your organization can go through this program. It's called the Workplace Inclusivity Program, and it adheres to the British standards for menstruation to menopause in the workplace, and covers a whole range of inclusivity issues and really changes the culture of an organization. And I do boot camps on that as well, like 2-day boot camps. So so many things have happened since pivoting the business and really sort of taking hold of the reins rather than putting all of my eggs in, Holland and Barrett or someone else's basket. I now have control again. Yeah.
It seems that I mean, there's like about 3 or 4 life stories kind of wrapped into this this life story. But if you had to look back and so let's go back to where we started. The young Zareen, sort of mad about art, at school. With the benefit of hindsight, what would you be saying to her now?
I would probably be saying, don't grow up too fast. Stay with what you love and follow your heart. And I feel I have followed my heart, but I made so many mistakes. I really, but I'm not sorry for those mistakes, because they were part of, what molded me into who I'm becoming. And I'm still not there. I'm still growing. I'm still, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But it's, and when I have grandchildren. I have 4 grandchildren now, my son's kids, and I want to be a role model to them. I want them to do what they love. And the beautiful thing is, right now where we are in the world, you can do anything. There's nothing to hold you back at all. And I would say there's one of my mentors, one of my favorite mentors, Daniel Priestley, has a phrase which is be prolific, not perfect, which is, it means just do it. It doesn't, because I am a perfectionist, everything has to be perfect before it goes out. And I really have to force myself to just go with it, go with what you've got, test it, and see what happens. And then you can improve it as you go along. It doesn't have to be spot on. It doesn't have to be perfect. And the other thing right now is, especially with AI and everything that's happening there, yes, it's a massive advantage. If I'd had AI, if I'd had ChatGPT when I was writing my book, I just missed it. It would have helped me with my grammar and things like that. I still would have written it. But it's like, who was saying it? Simon Sinek, I think, was talking about the value of the human touch. and doing it yourself with your own hands, and how I think it's already, having had ChatGPT for a couple of years, we're already craving email that hasn't got the M dashes and isn't perfect, an email that isn't perfect, or a kind of a graphic that isn't perfect, a video that isn't completely airbrushed and you're not thinking, oh, is that an AI generated image? We're already craving humanity.
Yes.
And I think that it's very important to acknowledge that now and keep a hold of the reins of human interaction and relationships more than anything, especially in your workplace, especially with your family and those you love, and actually book time in with your friends, book time in with your family, and prioritize it like it's your work meetings. Don't underplay the value of that.
Well, I interviewed Zareen last week now, and I'm still trying to get my head around her story. There is so much for all of us to learn from it. I love at the end of it all there where she says, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, which is absolutely brilliant. And the other things that she says that stuck with me, like, stay with what you love, follow your heart, be prolific, not perfect. And that bit at the end, how she feels that counter to the march of technology, we are starting to crave humanity all the more. Now, that was the first time we've done a two-parter, and to be honest, there were so many twists and turns to this story that we could have given Zareen her own series. So thank you to you, Zareen, and thank you to our growing band of listeners. We love the human connection that we're making here too, and the great feedback that we're getting on the show. So if you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast, look for me, Trevor Meriden, or our business Merriborn on merriborn.co.uk. So until next time, thanks for listening.